It's contagious, man.
Welcome everybody here to the Basketball Passport on this fine Sunday evening, Sunday night, depending on where you are. I'm Anthony Irwin of the Lakers Lounge and Clutch Points and all of that good stuff, joined as always by Leigh Ellis of a whole bunch of other good stuff. Leigh, this weekend, the NBA Cup got underway. And I think my favorite comment was from Rui Hachimura, who said, "We just want to win the money." I'm happy. I'm happy that they're being that brazen about it. But no, Leigh, how you holding up?
Yeah, pretty good, man. Although just before we came on air, my Atlanta Hawks were up by 10 points over the Portland Trailblazers with only probably, 5-6 minutes to go in the third quarter. And then they went on a 22-2 run, the Blazers. So they're now up 13 going into the fourth. So I'm heavily invested in the Hawks this season. I was pretty happy when we were up 10, cruising along. Now it looks like we're going to get this 4-game road trip off to a bit of a rough start there. So the fluctuations, man, of being back in fandom and just watching your team I mean, in basketball, you should have seen the Blazers this 22-2 run. It was literally, it felt like about 6 possessions and the Hawks couldn't get a stop. And the Blazers just hit everything they put up. Delano Banton hit a crazy 3 as the shot clock ended, and so it's crazy. But we'll never know. I've been impressed with. I've been really impressed with the Hawks so far at times this season. They've had a few stinkers, no doubt about that. But Quinn Snyder has them, at least for the most part, playing competitively and getting some good wins. So we'll see what happens here in the fourth quarter.
I have a feeling Portland will find a way to screw it up. They're very good at tanking is how I'll put it.
Yeah, it's back down to 7 points with about 7.5 minutes to go, so we'll see.
Like I was saying.
Yeah.
Today in the show, we have to talk about DeAaron Fox's weekend, where he scored a total of 109 points over 2 games, which is insane. We're going to talk about the NBA Cup. I went down to San Antonio to watch the Lakers play the San Antonio Spurs and watch LeBron James, in his own words, play like shit. So the Lakers still found a way to win. And in that game where LeBron, again, according to him, played like crap, he still able to get his 4th straight triple-double. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then Leigh, on the back half of the show, you're going to, or at the end of the show, you're going to tease this week's destination, where we are going back to Belgrade, right? Like that's yes. That's how the song goes, right?
Something like that. Yeah. Heading out to Belgrade in Serbia. I may actually do a change up here before Thursday because I'm waiting on something that might change it. But for now, we'll put in Belgrade, one of the most exciting basketball cities in the entire world. If you have never been to Belgrade and you're a basketball fan, you really have to add this one to your bucket list. It's an incredible city, great people, and the basketball culture out there is honestly second to none. You'll understand a bit more about Nikola Jokic when you go to Belgrade. You'll understand why he's not too fazed by pretty much anything that happens in the NBA or the USA. You'll understand, even though he's not from Belgrade himself, just growing up in that environment has certainly got him ready to handle pretty much anything that he faces, for the Denver Nuggets.
We haven't been to Belgrade yet, right?
No, we haven't. No.
We've been to Zagreb.
Croatia and Athens. Yeah.
So the reason I had Zagreb on the mind is because here in our super easy to access email account or to find email account, basketballpassportpod@gmail.com, we actually got a question from Nick Rusic about Zagreb, and so maybe later in the show we'll get to that one, because I don't believe we got to it in last week's episode or on Thursday's episode. So maybe there, if we have a little bit of time after our headlines, we'll hit that email as well. A quick reminder, please do hit that subscribe button if you guys are watching live on YouTube. If you guys are watching from anywhere else, I think this is being streamed through my Twitter account.
Mine too, yeah.
Please head on over to youtube.com/at basketball passport is where you can find the show. If you guys are listening in the audio form or listening to the audio form of the show, subscribe wherever it is that you get your podcasts, and we'll continue those numbers. They're all steadily increasing. Really kind of happy about the analytical growth of the show to this point. So all of that stuff really helps. Smash that like button, as our favorite YouTubers like to say. And hey, maybe if this show gets big enough, I'll be able to fight the corpse of Mike Tyson too. If we become that YouTube famous as well. Fortunately, if that does happen and I get my butt kicked, Netflix will be buffering the whole time and nobody will.
Nobody will see it anyway. Yeah.
Leigh, let's start with DeAaron Fox, who is, for my money, one of my favorite players to watch in the NBA. I think he won the inaugural
Clutch
Player of the Clutch Player of the Year award. And I love his left-handed jumper. It's really, really rare that you'll see a player so fast that he makes NBA players look a little slower. He does just that. I'm trying to figure out, though, he scores 109 points over the course of a weekend in those 2 games. And I haven't really heard about it at all. Nobody covered it. I have a theory on why Fox is not as highly regarded as maybe other players, as talented and capable and frankly successful as Fox is. Why don't you think he resonates with the national media in the way that he probably should?
Yeah, it's a great question because he is fun to watch. They were in Atlanta here only a couple of weeks ago, and he's one of those guys that you just know something is going to happen. And, all NBA players are fast, but he feels like he has that extra gear that not many guys have still at this stage of his career. But I think it just still comes back to, unfortunately, Sacramento. It's... they haven't had a ton of playoff success, obviously, in his time. Only, in fact, one playoff full series where they lost in 7 there to the Warriors. And prior to that was that drought of 18 seasons of not making it. So you just sort of fall off the radar because I think, we all think of that Sacramento team back in the, late 90s and early 2000s, one of the most fun teams to watch in that great environment there in Arco. But that was basically the end of it as well. We just didn't see anything. So it wasn't like it was just a flow on from one era to the next. It was kind of like they were anonymous there for a while. Of course, the DeMarcus Cousins years were in there. Excuse me. But, so you've got to really, I think, have a long, sustained playoff run over a number of seasons to really capture an audience, and they just haven't been able to do that. And then other than that, I mean, he scored all these points. They're down a few bodies right now as well, so he sort of had to carry that extra workload in some regard. But there just hasn't been sort of that highlight reel, star in Sacramento for a long time. Harrison Barnes, very, very good, reliable player. Now DeMar DeRozan's there. I mean, DeMar at the end of games, is still very, very valuable. He knows how to get his buckets. Yep. He did that in Atlanta. But again, just not one of those marquee, got to watch him guys, because he's got pretty much an old man sort of game, that mid-range. So I think it's a number of factors. But again, just being Sacramento going up against the other California teams, obviously the Lakers and the Warriors, doesn't really give them enough, meat on the bone after that. So I hope, I love watching him play, and I hope they can get back to the playoffs and have more success. But of course, he had the 60 points there on Friday, but they lost to the Minnesota Timberwolves, and then they go and beat the Jazz when he has the 49. Now the Wolves are a good team. They lose in overtime there. So, didn't get that same celebration if it was a, historical win in the moment and all of a sudden he did something crazy. So it was more like, he had 60, but he lost. And guys now getting 50 and 60 is not quite as unique as it used to be. I mean, remember we had Wembanyama and Giannis on the same night on Wednesday, I think it was. They had 59 and 50. So, a guy cracking 60 doesn't quite stand out maybe as much as it did in years gone by too.
The biggest thing is the winning, the lack of postseason success. At the end of the day, NBA culture is still very invested in rings culture. Mm-hmm. And, this is actually a pretty decent summary of the topic at hand here, right? DeAaron Fox is incredible, but the Kings lose, and in a way, it pretty kind of thoroughly encapsulates what we're kind of talking about. The other thing too, my theory building off of all of this too is when he came out of college, he wasn't like an analytics darling, and a lot of like, draft people weren't exactly over the moon about him, and like I feel like the analytics heavy crowd has a real tough time kind of admitting that they get something wrong. And in Fox, like, I think he was taken pretty early by the Kings in the first round. And the pick was kind of mocked at the time. And then he's very easily at this point worth the spot that they picked him in. Then on top of it, an actual analytics darling comes along in Tyrese Halliburton. And for a while there was like, well, maybe Halliburton should, get the touches that aren't going to Fox. And then they make the Halliburton for Domantas Sabonis trade, which was pretty thoroughly mocked at the time. And again, by I think that same crowd, it winds up being a win-win. The Kings wind up getting into the playoffs. The Indiana Pacers get all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. Halliburton is off to a slower start this season, but I don't think there's much concern that he's never going to figure it out. And I just don't think that we're very good at like covering win-win trades. Or admitting that we get something wrong, which is a really weird thing
when
it comes to the draft.
I see that all the time, people putting their hand up and saying, hey, I got this wrong, or I just want to put this tweet out there that I had 3 years ago and said this guy was a bust and now he's a stud. I mean, no, that's the way we live these days. No one is ever going to call back a mistake. But, if someone tweets something, says, hey, I picked this guy to be a star, and then 5 years later he is, everyone brings back that tweet and says, see, I saw this. I knew this was
weird,
happening.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, that's a bonus. Halliburton trade is an interesting one because, it was actually a trade that worked out for both. Now, again, I wouldn't have made it because I still thought Halliburton was going to be good, but it's not as though the Kings got hosed in that deal. I mean, Sabonis has been a really nice fit. He's a great player still. So, he's done that. And then you look at Halliburton, like I say, he is off to a bit of a slower start this season. He had that 0-point game, which was incredible for a player of his talent to register a goose egg in a game. But, he's also won a Game 7 in Madison Square Garden already in his young career. There were some injuries, of course, there for the Knicks, but he still had to perform on that stage. He was part of the team that won the gold medal. So everyone can see the talent there for Halliburton. But it would be interesting to see just how things would be different there in Sacramento if Halliburton and DeAaron Fox had stayed together, because I actually think they could have complemented each other, but obviously the Kings thought otherwise and gets a bonus. But I think ultimately it does come down to you need to see these guys in the playoffs for a number of seasons and going certainly beyond the first round, because remember that series against the Warriors, they played them really well, won those first 2 games easily. Won Game 5 back in Sacramento. Oh, no, I can't remember. But anyway, it was Game 7 back in Sacramento, and it was Kevon Looney who really, with all those offensive rebounds, remember, kept the Warriors in the game, and they obviously, then Steph goes and closes it out. So you just want to see that. But this is a key season, I think. This is his 7th season for Fox. If they don't make anything more than the play-in, you're going to start to hear some rumblings that he's going to want to move anyway. And Mike Brown, who is a good coach, but he would have been there now for, 3 seasons. And so it's, those sorts of things just start to become louder and louder when you have that initial success, but you don't want that to be where it peaks either. You don't want it to be like, hey, one playoff series that they didn't win. You have to be better than that, because they finished 3rd that season, had home court, but couldn't cash in on it.
Yeah, the other thing too that we always seem to screw up with trades too is that and again, it kind of goes back to the draft thing, not being willing to admit that we get stuff wrong. Trades take a long time to figure out, like the implications of trades stretch decades sometimes because of draft considerations and the lengths of guys' careers. players that are acquired in that trade that you wind up moving for other stuff and how that impacts like the overall return for a trade. Like the idea that people were so quick to like call it, I had some people comparing it to like the Russell Westbrook trade. I'm like, look, man, I lived the Russell Westbrook trade.
Yeah.
That was a much worse disaster than two teams that wound up going to the playoffs. They both wind up making it to the playoffs. One team makes a lengthy playoff run. The other team is well situated to continue to compete for the playoffs for years to come. I think it was a win-win, and DeAaron Fox is one of those cornerstones in the league. And the other thing too that I think is really, really important here, Leigh, is the way that he resonates with that fan base.
Yes.
You watch him. I haven't been to a game in Sacramento ever, but like I haven't seen one that he has played in Sacramento. But you watch him during that season where he won the Clutch Player of the Year award.
Yeah.
And you listen to the pops that came off of those, some of the buckets that he was getting that was icing games or those, go ahead buckets late in games. And the way that the crowd just goes absolutely ballistic for DeAaron Fox is really, really cool. It's a fan base that's always been incredibly passionate.
Yeah.
It's a fan base that has always cared deeply and is actually really knowledgeable about their team.
Yeah.
Because it's a smaller fan base, great people covering it too. I think DeAaron Fox is like one of the most underrated players in the league. And I think there's some other factors there that really kind of highlight some of the iffier aspects of like our industry.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think Sacramento is one of those, because there's no other professional team there, so it's ours. It's the NBA.
Well, now they're going to have a baseball team playing in a minor league.
Are they?
But
right, okay. But I think it's one of those things. Like again, you like I love that Chris Webber, Vlade Divac, Peja Stojakovic team. With Rick Adelman there, and it felt like they played every Sunday night. And it felt like every Sunday night was just like a Game 7 of the playoffs, the fans cheering every single basket. And it was one of the most intimidating environments. Yeah, exactly. And it was like, man, if they had won a championship or two back then, just imagine how different the franchise would be viewed now, because I think still it's like, unfortunately, the Rudy Gay situation at that time, he said, welcome to basketball hell, so it's got that reputation for not being a place to go to succeed. But interesting to see here what happens. I mean, they drafted Fox, so he's been there his whole career. He took them back there to the playoffs. He's been an all-star. He's done lots for that franchise. I just hope it doesn't get to a point, because after 7, 8, 9 seasons, if you're not really progressing and going into the playoffs, it's pretty obvious what's going to happen. That he's either going to look to be moved, or they're going to just say, well, let's see what we can cash in on for him before he reaches into his early 30s and the value drops a little.
Yeah. Well, if he is moved,
you could find a team for him.
Really happy to get him. That's all I'm saying.
You think D'Lo and Picks will get him back to down to Los Angeles? Lefty for
maybe
lefty.
I'll entertain the idea of moving Dalton for him. How about that?
Dalton,
maybe.
Yeah.
Ooh, actually, no. Let's talk about the cup. It's underway. The Emirates Cup is its official title. I'm just going to stick with calling it the NBA Cup. That's what it should have been all along. That's what it should still be. The courts are, I think, a significant improvement over last season. They don't look like shuffleboard tables. So I think that's a great stride forward there. Two key factors here that I have noticed that are really, really important for the success of this thing. One, the players have bought in. It's inarguable at this point. And I'm a cup skeptic. I kind of rolled my eyes at this whole thing when it was first announced. Players are really invested in the $500K bonus that they could possibly get if they win enough of these games. The presentation of these games and the fan buy-in, that's a result of that, I think is another big one. I still think the points total and all of that stuff is a little bit too math heavy. Like the last thing that I think fans really want, it works in soccer because you're talking about adding up, or you're in globally it's football. But like if you want to, it works if you're adding up either 3 or 1 point decisions, Whereas when you're talking about point differentials and stuff in the NBA, you're doing a lot of math there. Like if my daughter can't handle the math here, I think it's a little too it's a little too convoluted. But the players have bought in, fans have bought in, and I think it's here to stay. What are your thoughts on the cup to this point?
Well, again, so far, the Hawks, that's the team I'm following so closely this season. They had an incredible win in Boston without Trae Young in their first game. Down 15, they were 16.5-point underdogs in that game. Down 15, they came back and won, an incredible performance. But then on Friday, they played the Wizards in another cup game. And so I was like you, I was kind of like, this is just a lot of lipstick on a pig, really. It's not going to change too much. But when it comes to that point differential, what happened, especially in this Wizards and Hawks game, was, the Wizards, there's no garbage time. And I think that's one of the biggest things that Adam Silver is trying to get into the regular season, so that you're not watching maybe 6.5 minutes, which sometimes happens in the NBA. You can sometimes get that last quarter can be garbage time. Yeah. But now that the point differential has an impact, teams are like saying, okay, we might not win this game, but we've got to make sure we protect that sort of secondary loss there. You can't just get blown out by 25 points. You might not recover from that. So in the sense that it becomes a little more competitive throughout the time in the game, I think that is an important step. And I think that is a step in the right direction, because you and I have talked about it. There's too many games and there's too many meaningless games. Well, the Cup is trying to at least say, well, we're trying to put some value on regular season games in November. And I think that is a win there for the league. Now, I would do some other tweaks, of course, but I think from last season to this season, the NBA is learning. They're saying, okay, we need to try, this and that. But the courts are an improvement. And I would also tweak it somewhat where it's like, okay, you know what? We're going to try something where you get one less timeout maybe in the last quarter as well. So the game sort of still speeds up, but it's got to remain competitive, because there's still no real change in the rules or anything like that. It's still a regular season game. But I think, again, if you can try to add another element that separates these games from the other regular season games, I think that will then create a little bit more fan interest as well, where you're like, oh, we've got to win tonight, not just for tonight, but this could help our seeding, down the road there. So I enjoyed it, but I certainly absolutely loved the Hawks court, the yellow that they had out there. That was really, really nice. And walking into the arena and seeing it, I was like, it does actually feel like, there's something else going on here tonight. And so that's what, again, the NBA needs to try to create, because when you look at Euro League and Champions League soccer, that's what the difference is it feels different when you're watching those. You're not just watching the normal domestic regular season games. You are seeing something that like this game has stakes in it tonight and they're important.
I really like that point you made there about like some rule tweaks for the actual games. The league to this point has really, like, anytime they're considering trying something out, they started in the G League and then they see how that goes there. But the problem with that though is not enough people watch G League games to really kind of recognize or for the league to be able to gauge whether or not a rule change is working down there. If you're trying something out, so like right now, the conversation, it was funny. I was having a conversation with a Spurs reporter who was sitting next to me for, during that game. We were talking about like how guys are shooting too many threes. And while we were having that conversation, I think Wemby shot like 13 threes in that game. And I was like, and I could just feel like the old man in me, like, like you're 7'5". There's a point in that game, Leigh. AD had Wemby boxed out. He had good position on him. Yeah. Wemby just reaches over the top of Anthony Davis, tips the ball to himself, and then finishes there. And I'm like, stand in the paint. Like I understand shooting like 5 or 6 threes or something like that because he's got a nice stroke. I get that. But when you're shooting teens 3-pointers, like old man shakes fist at cloud is how. But so we're having this conversation and we were talking about like and I was listening to a podcast too going into the weekend as I was driving down there to San Antonio about like the number of threes that guys and teams are taking. And it makes me think like, building off of your point about rule tweaks, that they try out the no corner 3-pointer court in this. You want the court to look different. have that arc just extend all the way as it normally would. I would maybe tweak. I would like fewer primary colors extending all the way down the court, like where some of these courts like these bright red colors or these bright blue colors, and it just really kind of hits my eyes a certain way. But like the rule changes, elim endings, I think should be in consideration for the cup as well. I think all of those things should be in play. And look, it's very early on in this process, and I do think the league is heavily invested in making sure this works and resonates beyond just the 500K that the guys get.
Yeah.
But one way I think to do that is, and one way to really separate these games from the rest of the season, like how much fun would it be if for the cup games, guys were allowed to goaltend like they do in FIBA play?
Well, right, exactly. Or what about make it as well, if you shoot a 3 and you miss, you're not allowed to shoot another 3 on that same possession. Yeah. So you get the offensive rebound, you can't kick it out. You've got to take a 2-pointer, or if you do take a 3-pointer, it only counts for 2 points or something like that, because we're taking enough threes. We know this is a problem that needs to be addressed by the NBA. So why don't we make it so that, okay, because the shot clock, remember, it used to reset to 24, and then a FIBA rule, they changed it to 14 on the second chance, which I think is great because it's like, you get the ball, but you've only got 14 seconds, so you can't milk the clock here too much. Well, let's try something else like that. So, okay, if you miss a shot, it cannot be a 3-pointer, maybe even on that whole possession. You just say you can't have a 3-pointer on that possession. You have to take it inside or do something to try to encourage, again, driving, inside play, mid-range, whatever it is. But also it makes the players think that this is a little bit different. It's not the same as what we could normally do, the next night if you're playing a game that's not a cup game. Because I think if you're not going to try something like this, then you're sort of going to eventually get to the point where people will say, well, what's the point if there's nothing different? So, for a season or two, just say, right, we're going to trial this rule. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you've got to give it at least 2 seasons, I think, to try it out, to see how things go. And I wouldn't be surprised if the NBA does that. I was speaking to someone actually at the Hawks game who said they are trialing many things in the G League this season, some to do with the challenge system as well. So, yeah, you're right. No one's really watching the G League. No one's studying it and analyzing it from our vantage point. But there are several people who are experimenting, with the NBA there to try to figure out a way, to keep games even more competitive without, drastically changing the rules too much, just tweaking 1 or 2 here and there and saying, okay, or I know Kirk Goldsberry sort of was approached by the NBA several years ago, and one of the ideas he had was a cap on how many threes you could take. I also think maybe there's a cap on how many you can make. So it's like, rather than say you can take, 30 or 40 or whatever, just say once you've hit 20 threes, that's it. No more threes count as threes. You can still take them, but they only count as 2. So I think there's things like that to at least be considered that might have a really positive impact on the game.
I think contested dunks should count for 3 points.
Sure.
And then if you get the end one, you can, because the problem right now is that, like, not only are 3-pointers obviously worth more than 2, but if you make a 3 and you get and you're fouled, that is now worth 2 whole possessions.
Yeah.
Compared to a team that takes like a smart in rhythm 2-pointer, so like if you're going up for a dunk and you get fouled on a dunk and you make it, that should be worth as much as a fouled 3-pointer. I think it's a more exciting play, and it would, I also think we should limit the way that charges are taken too and stuff like that. But there's so many things, and all of this is to say that, like, the cup is a place where that should be the idea breeding ground.
Yeah.
That's where you should really be trying some stuff out.
Yeah, for sure. The charge rule is one of those ones that, again, I still don't really understand.
Charge on a pass, like when someone just stands there.
Well, and there was one tonight, I don't know if you saw it, the Minnesota Timberwolves and Suns game, where Booker went in and I think it was Conley. I mean, like, his feet were just not set. But I know that they don't have to be as well, which is weird to me. It's like, well, if he's moving, he should not be able to take a charge because you need to be set. And he wasn't, but he did, and they couldn't challenge. I don't think they had a challenge. So there's some weird things. Again, I don't know if you saw as well the Hornets and the Bucks finish yesterday, where LaMelo tripped over his own feet. And they lose that game.
Make sure to tell everybody about it.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, like, it's easy to make fun of Doc, but in those situations, I'm also shrugging my shoulders, like saying, I mean, that's such a missed obvious call, but they don't have a challenge. But this also cost the game. So, I don't quite know what the ultimate benefit should be. Is like, well, if we're going to let this game, and then Jason Tatum traveled on the game winner against the Raptors. So two teams that won games yesterday probably shouldn't have, but they do. And we just sort of shrug our shoulders and go, okay, fine, who cares?
Yeah. Well, I don't think everybody does.
No, no, I just mean it in the sense that, like, we aren't ultimately going to, get the right result, or at least the right decision in the moment. Instead, it's like the NBA says, "Oh, Jason Tatum traveled." It's like, well, we all saw it, Yeah. But again,
oh man, there's nothing worse than the 2-minute report. Stop sending those.
But
I don't need that anymore. All it does is like bring back up the mistake that we know you made in the first place. Or like what's even worse is when they don't mention a mistake that we know that they made.
Yeah.
It's like, the end of this game that had 5 missed calls. Actually, we're only going to mention one of them in this 2-minute report. And it's like, no. Like, we were watching, so.
Well, and the thing with the Tatum call, I mean, there are so many times throughout the game where you see what appears to be a travel anyway and doesn't get called. So
yeah,
who knows?
Yep. All right. The final headline here that we got to talk about here is my trip down to San Antonio. I did watch the Lakers play the Spurs. It was actually a cup game that I got to watch there. Not the biggest fan of like the gray court. I know that gray is like that's what the Spurs jerseys and stuff are. They're all in grayscale. But it looked like Pleasantville. I don't know if you ever watched that movie. It was but anyway, so the Lakers and the Spurs played 120-105 was the final there. LeBron dropped a triple-double. Anthony Davis had like 40 points and 10 rebounds. Wemby was incredible there too. Stephon Castle, like for stretches of the game, looked like the best player on the court. Just a really, really fun game there. Really cool crowd too, because you have a proud Spurs fan base that I think is getting back into it after going through the post-Duncan lull. Now they're, with Wemby there and hopefully here soon, they really start winning at a higher level so that fan base can really kind of be rewarded. Before the game, JJ Redick told us in the scrum about a picture of him and Mitch Johnson at a Senior Frogs that is apparently out there somewhere. Those guys coached against each other in that game. Need to find that picture. Right. Just a really, really fun experience. But the thing that I walked away from the game with is like the fact that LeBron, nearing age 40, would A, get his 4th straight triple-double, and B, do so in a game that he was not at all impressed with the way that he was playing. And he really wasn't that good, had a bunch of turnovers. I think Dan Wojcicki joked that he neared a quadruple-double with the number of turnovers that he had.
Right.
But I think the biggest story, if you're a Lakers fan, is that the Lakers are able to win a game where LeBron plays poorly. The bigger story, if you're a national NBA fan, though, is that somehow, some way, at 40 years old, you have LeBron still in a bad game, having that kind of an impact on winning against a like sneaky, fun, good team in San Antonio. What do you think about, like, at what point are we going to like really start saying a real slide here from LeBron? This is nuts.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I keep saying that I think he probably is the best athlete I've ever seen in the sense of the performance from, he was hyped up 2 or 3 years before he even made the NBA.
Yep.
And you think over the years how many guys coming out of college who are like, this guy's the number 1 pick with a bullet, and those guys have good to moderate careers, or some even better than others, but to live up to the hype and then exceed it the way that he has and then still at this age, I mean, the father in me is like, well, listen, you can't have your best player on the team be a 40-year-old man. It just is, that's not, usually the recipe to winning a championship, because at some point you feel, those miles in his legs, not just this season, but over the last last 22 seasons, are going to catch up to him. But the fact that he's still able to perform the way that he is like this, it's remarkable. I mean, he's just an incredibly, an incredible physical specimen. And then on top of all that, he handles all the media, he handles all the criticism, all the social media backlash. And, he's for some people, he's automatically the greatest of all time. And then for others, it's like you will never surpass Michael Jordan. And so he's always sort of dealing with that stuff as well. And now, he's doing it in the biggest market in basketball, and he's doing it really well. So it's great. I think it's remarkable. But I will also say that I think the concern I have for the Lakers going forward, and even with Anthony Davis is on a heater right now too. I mean, he's playing some of the best ball he's ever played, hitting threes. I think he's had 5 straight games of 2 3-pointers or more, which is also great. But you sort of want to see a little bit more depth and balance from these other guys. If because Anthony Davis, we know, has an injury history. He tends to always miss some time, and that workload could catch up with him. And these games, recently they beat the Spurs. They beat the Grizzlies with no Ja. They beat the Pelicans, who are obviously always shorthanded as well. So wins are good. It's a black and white league. Wins good, losses bad. And that's all that matters. And the Lakers have banked 5 in a row here. But you hope at some point LeBron will get some in-game load management where they don't need a triple-double for him against the Pelicans to win a game. They'll get better contributions and more even spread. But again, for now, it's like, because they had a couple of stinky losses there to the Pistons and
Memphis,
with Ja Morant. So that maybe is not a stinky loss. That's a tough one. But they
went out. Like Ja got hurt that game.
Right. Yeah, that's right. He went down. Yeah. So the Lakers right now, they can't. I think for them, they need to be ahead of the game this season. They can't get 5-6 games below 500. That'll just put them in a too tough position. They need to be certainly in the top 4, I think, in the playoffs. Have home court advantage so that they can, get to a point where they're not sort of playing uphill, which they have done obviously in the last few seasons.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they now sit at 9-4, maybe 10-4. And I think it's 10-4. And they're able to, they can go to Rob and realistically say to him, Rob Pelinka, and they can go to Rob Pelinka and they can say, like, we've done our part.
Right.
We have won enough. Like, there is not the excuse this year of like, there's just too far to go to get over the hump. No, if the Lakers keep something like this up and they get to the trade deadline and they're in that like 4 or 5 seed range, where they can make a move that does realistically put them over the theoretical hump, that becomes a harder sell for Rob, who has been really reluctant to push more chips into the table on a 40-year-old LeBron and on an in and out of the rotation Anthony Davis over the years. Like, at this point, it's going to be pretty difficult for them for him to sit this deadline out, and it'll be curious to see what direction they go, because you mentioned how much it takes from LeBron and from AD for the Lakers to be competitive. The Lakers are actually a net negative in terms of net rating while those two are on the court together, which is how. Yeah, like, mathematically, that doesn't make any sense to me. And I think what they'll need to do is improve the small forward spot, because I think Austin is legit. I think Austin Reeves is legit. Dalton Connect is on a bit of a tear from a rookie standpoint too. Max Christie finally looks like he cares about basketball again. So we'll see what they look like. But I think they need a better two-way wing. You have Vanderbilt, who's an impact defensive player. You have Rui, who's an impact offensive player. They need to get somebody who can do both. They need a Cam Johnson or something.
Mikal Bridges, someone like that. Not that they obviously would be able to get him, but that's the sort of player they need. But I just wonder as well, how difficult that job is for Rob to get a, decent trade. How many teams are prepared to really help the
Help
Lakers
the
out.
Lakers.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, because there's no question that those things come into play. You know, that teams would be like, yeah, we could make that trade, but there's no way we're helping you guys out. You know, you're going to have to either give us more for that player, you know, and overspend in order to get them, or we're just not going to deal with you because no one wants to sort of help out the the evil empire in that sense. So
Yeah.
I think it's
plus
tough,
like the
but
sideways looks that you get, right, from your
course.
from your colleagues. Like, why?
Yeah. Well,
Why'd you help them?
remember going
What?
back to when the Grizzlies traded Powell and
Yeah.
to the Lakers and for Kwame Brown, and I can't remember the rest of it, but
Tavares
Greg Popovich.
Crittenton and
Yeah,
Mhm.
Greg Popovich is like, I can't believe that deal
This
was
is
allowed to happen.
yeah.
So that's the other challenge there facing Rob Pelinka is like, listen, I've got a couple of picks here, I've got a little bit of, I've got some, but guys like D'Angelo Russell, I mean, you're just not going to get anything back of significance for him. Everyone knows right now that's just like the biggest risk. D'Angelo's had some incredible games and some incredible moments, but the risk is not worth giving up anything. A lot of teams would take him as a freebie, as a throw-in, as a free agent, but not as a central piece of any deal. Not that would give the Lakers in return what they're really missing.
Yeah, they moved D'Lo to the bench. I'm not saying that there's a correlation here.
Yeah.
It's a correlation. I don't know if there's a causation here.
Right.
But they moved D'Angelo Russell to the bench and immediately went on a 5-game winning streak.
Yeah.
And like we can mention the teams that they've been playing in the meantime.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. But what I will say is that there are a lot of people around the league paying close attention to how Russell handles coming off of the bench, because I think that's where his career is kind of naturally taking him.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people who I've spoken to are kind of like, well, if he accepts this role, that's a lot clearer path to being a postseason impact player. Yeah. We don't have to rely on him being a core 5 player, a starting or closing 5 player. If he's open to this over the course of the season and then beyond this season, I think his market as a free agent will go up quite a bit, and his interest in teams being interested in him at the deadline is going to go up quite a bit. Hell, it might make it difficult for the Lakers to trade him because if he accepts this role, that's something the Lakers have been hoping for the last couple seasons.
Oh, there's no doubt he's one of those guys who could win you a playoff game easily. He could have one of those nights.
Lose him for you too.
Oh, look, it's that's the gamble. But he's got that upside where it's like, yes, if you can convince him, hey, come off the bench like a Lou Williams or a Jamal Crawford, you can basically have free reign out there. Just don't give up what you're putting up, and don't take those crazy shots. Get open, get to your spots, and you can knock them down. But if he's able to accept that, which who knows? I mean, that's the real challenge for everyone to convince him that it's worth it. I mean, there are enough guys over the years who have been very effective as the 6th man because they can just go out there and fire away. But it still takes a lot for a guy to put his ego to a side and say, all right, I'm just going to accept my role permanently as coming off the bench.
Yep. All right. Today's or the final thing on the docket here is this week's upcoming destination, which is going to be Belgrade, Serbia.
Yes.
And you mentioned it at the top, Leigh, a really, really cool basketball community. We know how much Jokic loves going home and how much he loves his horses there. What do we have in store for us on Thursday?
Yeah, so my first experience in EuroLeague was going to the craziest derby of all time, which was Red Star versus Partizan Belgrade. And now they're obviously playing the same domestic league, but this was the first time 2 years ago they actually played in the EuroLeague. They both qualified for EuroLeague. So the stakes in this game were incredible. And I was there. The game was on a Thursday night. I arrived on the Monday evening. Just walking around the city, you could feel that like these teams, there was so much at stake here. I spoke to a lot of people on the street. I did a feature for EuroLeague where we got Red Star and we got Partizan fans there talking with each other and just saying how like within our family, you're either born Red Star or you're born Partizan, and there's no changing, and when people have like relationships and things like that, and it's almost like a Romeo and Juliet thing. It's like, hang on a minute, I'm seeing a Red Star fan. I'm not sure if this will go down with my family. So it was an incredible experience. And then I played out there at Calamigdon Park on the courts, which were just so perfect and so amazing. And I just fell in love with Belgrade. It was a beautiful city. The only surprise for me, or sort of setback or obstacle, was how they just smoke in restaurants and bars and that still. And it was like going in a time machine where you're just like, oh my God, I haven't walked into a restaurant and just felt this like waft, being engulfed by cigarette smoke. And then you sort of say, is there a non-smoking section? And they sort of go, well, you can sit there if you want. I'm like, is that non-smoking, or is that just right now people aren't smoking? They've just, they've just butted out a couple of cigarettes. So,
it would explain why Jokic breathes through his mouth as much as he does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, everywhere I've been, I've fallen in love with. But Belgrade is certainly a place that I hope to go back. I've been twice. Hope to go back a third time. The next derby is in January, so we'll see if that one comes together. But I'll have a little bit more to talk about with Belgrade on Thursday.
I can't wait. I cannot wait. Oh, by the way, while I was in San Antonio, I did run into a fellow Australian, a countryman of yours, Kane Pittman.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
He said to say hi while I was there. Said he's really happy to have you back in the podcast space. So that was kind of cool. I meant to say that during the San Antonio conversation. I forgot.
Yes. Yeah. No, Kane doing some good work up there in Connecticut for ESPN, and I mean primarily ESPN Australia, but doing some work for ESPN too. So good to see a few more Australians out in this space. We're not just out on the court; we're also off the court and holding up the microphone. So it's great.
We have a couple minutes here? Do you want to answer the email question?
You know what? I'd actually rather save that one because it's about Šibenik, where Dario Saric is from.
Perfect.
And I want to do an actual whole episode on Šibenik because I went there. There's so much Drazen Petrovic history as well. So I think I will save it. But I know that Elliot here said in the comments here, he said, I've got an email coming for you guys, so keep it up. We haven't received that yet, but hopefully we get to that also on Thursday. Malcolm here as well talks about Milos Teodosic, who I'm sure you remember. Of course, he is back at Crvena Zvezda, Red Star Belgrade right now. One of the most creative players. He wasn't there when I was there. He was still in the NBA, but Red Star. Yeah, there it is. Red Star, Crvena Zvezda. That's what I learned to say.
Milos, one of those guys who looked like he was playing with a cigarette in his mouth.
Yeah. Yes.
You told the story of Vlade, like in James Worthy and smoking in the locker room.
Yeah.
Milos looked like, he would sub out and be like, yo, anybody got a light?
Yeah. Well, one of the trips I went to Belgrade, I went to a Euro it was a World Cup qualifier between Serbia and Turkey. And that was in the Alexander Nikolic Arena in Belgrade. And again, no smoking signs everywhere. Everyone just just smoking away.
Yeah. There's people with flares there, and people like, hold on, let me use that really quick.
Yeah. It was that was incredible, that environment there too, because huge rivals, of course, huge stakes in that game. And I'll talk a little bit about that too on Thursday.
Awesome. I cannot wait. Well, that is going to do it here for this episode of the Basketball Passport Pod, the Sunday edition where it's a lot more NBA focused, but we'll have a global edition coming on Thursday where, again, Leigh is going to be taking us to Belgrade, and I cannot wait. A reminder, please do hit that subscribe button if you guys are watching live here on YouTube. If you're not watching live on YouTube, if you're watching on Twitter, head on over to youtube.com/@basketballpassport where you can find the show there. Hit that like button as well so we can do well in Al Gore's rhythm, and hit us with an email. These emails keep on coming in. We are reading them. I get a kick out of reading them. That is basketballpassportpod@gmail.com. Give us those 5-star reviews too. That always helps as well. And until Thursday, have a great rest of your weekend.